On today's show, Yuki Matsui's injury and what it could mean for the rest of the Padres bullpen, center field still being a question mark, some big contract signings with Matt Chapman and Zach Wheeler, answering some of your questions and comments about the spring training and about the roster and about signing more players and a whole lot more. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Monday, March 4th. That's right, we're in the March of the 4th. I mean, yeah, but we're just in general, we're in March. And it is, I'm telling you, I warned y'all, we're close to opening day. I told y'all, we're right there. It's about to happen. As always, I'm your host with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, especially based on this introduction so far, Javier Reyes. You might be familiar with some of my baseball-related work over at Just Baseball, a great website that I recommend everyone check out. I've got a few articles coming over there myself. I actually recently wrote about Xander Bogaerts a little bit and how he is being doubted way too much. That made too much noise. My apologies for my listeners. And also have another project coming out for them soon, so that should be a lot of fun. You can also check me out on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno. And if you don't like my silly tweets on there, at LO_Padres. Or Locked On Padres on YouTube to see whatever I'm rocking. Today it's just like a Pokemon shirt. I don't know. Makes me happy looking at it. You know what I mean? It just reminds me of the good times before our souls start to decay as we age. You know what I mean? So that's what Pokemon reminds me of. Not the soul decaying part, but just nostalgia, I guess we could say. Today's episode, guys, we were talking about some of the, it's the news episode. We're going to talk about some of the headlines that happened over the last week or so and what they have to do with the Padres. Most of them did not have much to do with the Padres, frankly, which is fine because I think that the Padres, just being 16 days out of opening day and sale against the Dodgers, I think that it doesn't feel like there's much left in terms of signings at this point. Potentially some outfield stuff, which we'll get into. But for now, I first want to start with Yuki Matsui having himself a little bit of an injury. And it freaked everybody out, myself included, especially considering we had just talked about the other day, I believe on the last podcast, that his debut was awesome. 3 strikeouts. He was super deceptive with all of his pitches. Really made guys look stupid for a little bit. And granted, it's spring training. And granted, I still think that Matsui, while I think that he is potentially a closer of the future for the team, depending on how the situation with Suarez pans out, he's, it's possible that he starts off great. And it's just because people aren't used to seeing him, being from Japan and all, like from that league, not being as familiar with his stuff. So it might take some time. I compared him a little bit to Masahiro Tanaka when he first came over, where nobody could hit his splitter like at all. It was just not happening. And then people caught up, and he was still an effective pitcher. I'm just saying his arc is going to be interesting to follow, I think, for a lot of people, myself included. Although I will say, I keep forgetting to take away that reaction thing. Although I like that it gave me the thumbs up just now. He's injured, and it freaked everyone out. He did, however, resume playing catch on Friday. I already had my episode recorded before then, so I couldn't talk about it. Jeff Sanders of the San Diego Union Tribune reported, left-hander was shut down from throwing the past few days due to back inflammation, but he's back to playing catch Friday. Matsui will likely need to stretch out his throwing distance before returning to mound work, so he should be at least a week or two away from being ready for game action. So that might mean to me that that's the last you see of him until opening day. Totally possible. That's a little bit of a bummer. He's the rare situation because of, being an international player where I kind of want him to just get a few reps, just get a little bit comfortable against major league hitters, even if it's spring training. I just want him to get a little bit more comfortable, be with the team a little bit longer. Now, granted, he still will be with the team, but, he's going to be shut down for a little bit, probably not going to be doing any spring training stuff. Look, Matsui is huge because considering that the team lost so much from the bullpen, I think the Padres bullpen can be awesome this year. I'm very high on Steven Wilson. I think Tom Cosgrove is very good, although not a big strikeout artist. I think Robert Suarez can bounce back to something between what we saw in 2022 and 2023 and be at least effective. Woo-Sak Go is a really, really nice lottery ticket, I think, for this team, who used to be a highly touted prospect out of the KBO, and now it's just Did he lose it? We'll have to see because of the control issues. I still think he could be redeemed, especially with Ruben Niebla as our pitching coach. We love him. Niebla, let him cook, man. I've been saying this for a year now. Just let the man cook. He delivers gold every time. And some other guys, and I still think that, we're going to talk about him in a second, but Jairo Estrada, I think, could be an effective player for the team over the course of the season. I think they have stuff, for sure, the Padres. And I think that Matsui, though, being injured does scare you a little bit, especially with the depth, and especially since we don't know for sure who the closer is right now. I think it might be a little bit of a committee approach thing. So we'll have to see how this pans out, but hopefully it's not a big deal. Just a little bit of inflammation. You know what I mean? When has that ever come back to bite Padres fans in the butt? Being told that an injury isn't a big deal, that it ends up a big deal. But hey, I could be wrong. We'll have to see, guys. And as well as, I forgot to mention Enel de los Santos, who's important because the Padres basically salary dumped Scott Barlow in exchange for him, and then also having the ability to go out and sign Matsui and go. So again, hoping for the best. I think he's probably the most important reliever on this team, because if he's a big deal, then that fixes a lot of questions, because they don't really know who the closer is right now. And if Matsui's good, then that'll really ease up things, especially for Mike Schilt to manage. Speaking of Estrada, though, I forgot to mention, there was a little bit of a roster announcement sending some guys back down to spring training. Not a big deal. I don't think this means we're never going to see them again. But from the Padres account yesterday, we have reassigned the following players: Nick Hernandez, Jairo Iriarte, Adam Mazer, who's a little bit of a name that's worth bringing up only because he had such a interesting stretch last year that I think people might have been expecting. Is he a potentially bullpen guy that can make an impact? But not necessarily there. Sean Reynolds, Daniel Camarena, shouts to the legend. Obviously, shouts to the legend. Jay Groom. Remember when Jay Groom was getting a lot of hype last year before spring training as being like a guy that, was basically a throwaway piece in the dump of Eric Hosmer? And all of a sudden we were like, oh, what if he's like the fifth starter? That got interesting for a little bit, but still doesn't seem to have picked up ever since then. Austin Krob, Robbie Snelling, Ethan Salas, Marcos Castañon, Nathan Maratola. And then also this morning, right before I started recording, they also reassigned to minor league camp Matt Festa, Ryan Carpenter, and Bryce Johnson. They have 47 players left, so there's still a few cuts coming along. I still think that it's a little bit obvious not a little bit obvious, but it's seems a little bit more direct what to expect until we potentially get another free agent signing for this team, what the rest of the roster will look like. But, is it a little bit sad to see Ethan Salas and Robbie Snelling go, being the top prospect? Sure. But with Salas, the kid's like 18, like who cares? I know we wanted to see him more, but didn't impress much in the few spring training at bats. He had a couple strikeouts, although maybe got a little bit unlucky on some of the calls there. But it's fine. I mean, the kid's super young. And we have Luis Campusano, who homered yesterday, by the way. Do I have to say any more? The Campy Hive. I know you guys are out there. I know you're out there. There's many of us. We've been growing in strength for over a year now. Now we're an armada. It ain't even a hive anymore. It's the Campy Armada. My gosh. And then in terms of Snelling, I want them to keep Snelling, Lesko, Thorpe, give them as much minor league reps as possible before, in my opinion, inevitably being called up to the major league roster, especially considering that we don't know what's happening with the back end of this rotation with Johnny Brito, who's expected to pitch today. Might have pitched by the time you guys listen to this episode. And Randy Vasquez looking like potentially the back end of this rotation. We'll have to see. I like them more than a Pedro Avila personally, but there's also Matt Waldron in the mix, who I think could be like decent. Matt Waldron was actually not bad for the team last year. By the way, like, don't get me wrong, he's not like a superstar or anything like that, but he was at least able to throw some amount of innings when the Padres needed them. And I'm hoping he can be a little bit more effective with increasing his strikeout rate, at least just a tad. I think he could potentially do that, but we'll have to see how that pans out. In terms of other news, though, the rest of the news that happened. So first of all, Kike Hernandez, I mentioned this briefly the other day and how I literally talked about him being a potential center field solution for the Padres, and then he immediately got signed by the Dodgers. So shouts to him betraying us. How many players are going to keep betraying the Padres? Haven't you guys noticed that over the last year? It seems like whenever it's down to like the Padres and a bunch of other teams, they pick the other teams, whether it be players that end up not mattering as much like Nelson Cruz a couple years ago, or it be Trey Turner, Aaron Judge. It just feels like they keep losing whenever another team is really in heat. At least that's just based on reports, though. We don't know if there was like another team interested in Xander Bogaerts, for example. See, I'm getting the thumbs up from my computer right now. They know what's up. Look, I'm gonna even play the what's it called? What other reactions do I have anyway? We got a cool little anything celebration. Yeah, we got cool headlights and stuff. Yeah, see, we're killing it here on Locked On Padres, guys. Go check out the YouTube to see some of those reaction things and me being an idiot. We're going to take a little bit of a break, though, before we get into the rest of the news, guys, and talk for a quick second about our favorite sponsor, FanDuel. We love FanDuel. I don't know how many times I have to say we like FanDuel before I get it through all of your thick skulls. You know what I'm saying? Oh, man, look, football's over, but basketball is heating up. We're in March. So that means March Madness is coming around, and they've also got NBA bets, of course. But, of course, come on. Everyone wants to watch the NCAA. They're going to be March Madness. It's going to be a lot of fun this month. And MLB Futures, last chance to kind of cash in. Personally, I think the NL West is a stay away. Might be personally, except for the Dodgers. They're winning over 103 games. Just to break the news to everybody. But me personally, I am staying away from the NL West because I think the D-backs, Padres, and Giants could all finish in second. I really do. I see it anyway, so I would stay away from that. But go check out MLB Futures. Go check out Tatis's betting odds because they are a little bit lower than, in my opinion, they should be, considering his defensive output last year and that he's been an MVP candidate before. And also, here's the thing, guys. I'm not just giving you recommendations. They have an offer for you, FanDuel. New customers, $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. That's right, new customers. It's just for you, all you people who haven't checked it out yet. Go check it out. Also, bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And just like that, we are back, folks, here on the Locked On Padres podcast for Monday, March 4th. As always, as you know, go check us out. We are your first listen every day. Go check out the Locked On 24/7 sports channel. Basically just replays everybody's pods, and it's just kind of a constant thing to have on there. All of our lovely hosts of the Locked On Network, keeping you up to date on whatever you need to be kept up to date on. You know what I mean? Especially with baseball rolling in, you're going to see a lot of the baseball shows in rotation, so that'll be fun for all my fellow baseball degenerates out there. In terms of the rest of the news, though, aside from the minor league camp, aside from Yuki Matsui, basically the rest of this is big deals that happened over the past couple days for remaining free agents. And look, here's the thing. I mentioned Kike Hernandez. There's still some other guys out there that I think actually will be really relevant for the Padres, but in terms of what just happened this morning, Zach Wheeler was extended 3 years, $126. He can veto any trade. Only bringing that up because I want to say everyone has been ignoring my point about how next year's free agent class is stacked. Even with Zach Wheeler, who might have actually, I don't even think might have, probably the leading number one pitcher for next year's class, even without him now signing. So let's compare it to, like, let's pretend that the Padres had extended Blake Snell, and then everyone's looking at this free agent class being like, oh, wow, yeah, it's basically Aaron Nola, and that's it. That you still have next year Corbin Burns, you have Shane Bieber, you have Max Fried, you have Walker Buehler, who I think is going to be awesome when he comes back. Robbie Ray has an opt-out. Frankie Montas could be interesting. Jack Flaherty's velocity is up. Guys like, who was the last one I was going to bring up? Severino's out there. Merrill Kelly has a club option, which I think that they'll probably take, but even still, and that's not even counting all the position players. I just want to reiterate that every time and explain to everyone and stress to everyone that when all these big deals come in, also remember that the 2 seasons the Padres have had like the most success with is when they weren't making those big major moves. Back in 2020, in fairness, it was a little bit of a major move, the Tommy Pham move, and then also signing Drew Pomeranz and also trading for Trent Grisham. But they did it more in volume versus like one big contract. And then the year that they traded for Darvish, Snell, and Ha-Seong Kim, that didn't work out, and then they did nothing that offseason, more or less, with the exception of a couple things like bringing in, Taylor Rogers and whatnot, but they basically do nothing, and then they're a lot better. So I'm basically saying, don't lock yourself in. There's still a lot of good players on this team, and don't be freaking out if, say, the Padres are expected to have around $22 million left to spend if they wanted to avoid hitting that luxury tax threshold again. Don't be freaked out if it's like, oh, they're just pocketing the rest of it. It's like, maybe, but I just genuinely think that I don't want to overcommit to something that's going to be hampering the team next year and their $150 million or so payroll expected for 2025, and then make it that a more stacked free agent class that they can't choose anything from. That's just me, though. Other news, though, Matt Chapman, big deal for the Giants. Big deal for the Giants. Congratulations to them, first of all, because they have had as good of an offseason I think you can have. They've spent the most of any team outside the Dodgers, and by a pretty comfortable margin. I think that they've had like a genuinely good offseason considering that they can't attract the big fish right now. And it's not for those lazy, like dangerous city reasons, but more because they just don't have much of a farm system. They don't have an established, like, winning team necessarily. They're a little bit inconsistent. I think they did a pretty good job about providing depth, with Jung Ho Lee and whatnot. And Matt Chapman, 3 years, $54 million. I want to just throw this out there for everybody really, really quick. And believe me, this is not a shot to our guy, Manny. I just want to throw it out there. Matt Chapman last year, 3.5 F4. Last year for Manny Machado, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 3.8. Let me just check that really, really quickly. 3.5. Actually, it was the exact same. I'm just throwing it out there. If you are a fan of just saying, let's look at what other free agents are out there. If you want to be more available. If you do this, you got Matt Chapman, who in my opinion is actually going to be better than he was last year for the Giants. That's just a prediction of mine. He's a really good glove. The offense is just so tricky because he can hit the ball hard, but he's just has such a problem with his strikeout rate sometimes that I don't know if he's ever going to return to his genuinely MVP quality years beforehand. But I do think it says a lot that he's got a couple opt-outs in this deal. So he could potentially opt out after this next year and get a huge contract. This is a guy who, back in the day, and if a team fixes him, it's totally possible. Like, back with Oakland, this was a 6-5 win player. Like, he genuinely almost won the MVP one year, especially because he hit 36 home runs and he provided excellent Gold Glove defense. So, he's a really good player. And I'm just saying, like, let's pretend for a second that the Padres didn't spend all that money on Machado. You would have Matt Chapman potentially this year to help fill in that third base void, because I don't think there's any prospect right now that they could call up for that position unless they just wanted to put Kim there. You could have him and like a smaller deal with low downside, and then you could spend that money elsewhere, especially for a season like next year. Or you could have spent it potentially just trying to extend Soto for a long time. So I'm just bringing this up. I'm fine with the Manny extension in vacuum. I'm just saying this is why you don't want to overcommit for now, because things open up and possibilities open up. Matt Chapman might have an awesome year, and then he's getting paid for the next 6 because another team is going to pay him big time, right? That could totally happen. I'm just throwing out there, keep your options open. And I think it's weird that everyone seems, at least from my comments and what I see from fans and a little bit of media, that's like the need to want to overcommit to now to a group that since AJ Preller took over, this core of Manny, Tatis, and whatnot has not won over 89 games. This isn't like other established teams like the Astros, like the Braves, like the Phillies, where they have won more than 90 games and also gone a bit farther, including the World Series in all their cases. So I'm just bringing it up, not to ramble too much. Again, really cool contract for the Giants. Again, I am staying away from the NL West. I genuinely don't know like which team is going to finish second. I'm confident in the Padres, but the D-backs were just in the NL West. They fixed a lot of their holes, and the Giants have a lot of cool depth. Like Wilmer Flores had a 136 WRC plus last year, and he's going to be a bench player for them. Like, they can pick their spots with him. So I'm just saying, like, don't sleep on any of these teams. And I think that Matt Chapman will be a delight. If you're just a fan of good baseball, it'll be fun for Padres fans to just watch him playing third. And we could just pretend, not pretend, but we could be like, hey, we're going to be able to see that from Manny once he gets back. And Matt Chapman is a absolute unbelievable player to watch out there. So just throwing it out there. Last thing I want to note for news, really quickly. Also, Kike Hernandez also mentioned, is there owner collusion? I don't know if it was around Kike Hernandez. You've had like a bad stretch over the past few years, my Puerto Rican brethren. But, hey, I mean, look, here's all I'm going to say. Everyone in baseball, the baseball community, one thing I've noticed the most is everybody gets gaslit into thinking that not spending is actually great because it means Moneyball. Don't you love that Brad Pitt movie? I know Red Sox fans. I've been on Red Sox fans shows, people with like decent platforms and whatnot, who genuinely thought the Mookie trade wasn't bad and that they were actually like building towards something. I'm like, no, they weren't. You're the Red Sox. They just wanted to cut salary. And what's been happening over this offseason, they lose Bogarts last year. They have a dumb contract for Trevor Story. They lose all their good players for the most part, and they're just not spending. And then their owner's spending $1.5 billion on the PGA Tour. So look, Padres can be rough sometimes, but other teams have it worse. And again, I want to give a shout out because do not let them gaslight you into thinking not spending is a good thing. I know that contradicts some of the things I've been saying about let's be careful with how much we spend this year. I'm only saying that because the team is like really under lockdown for a while, and there's so many needs and there's so many questions, and you have a really interesting farm system that you want to, you know, try and use and give them some reps at the major league level eventually. And I want to have some more money left over for next year, similar to what the Dodgers did, where they basically completely sat out last year's offseason, then went supernova this offseason. So I've been saying a lot of thoughts, not a lot of them making a lot of sense, but don't worry, we're going to land the plane here. Last thing I wanted to mention was a really nice kind of story from Dennis Lin on Steven Wilson, who's confident that he's going to have a third pitch this year. I think that's been the one thing about him. I'm a believer in him because I just think that his sweeper and fastball are really effective. Opponents are hitting him under 150 against both pitches. But the put-away pitch that he tried to use the most last year was his changeup, and opponents hit 400 against it. Dennis Lin wrote about it a little bit. He's confident he'll have a third pitch. Needs a better put-away. And if he does, then I'm telling you guys, Steven Wilson, do not sleep on him, can be a really effective reliever. I wouldn't be shocked with any outcome with him, frankly, but I think he can be really, really positive for this team this year. And with that, guys, that about does it for the random assortment of news segment of today's show. But there's still some fun listener questions and comments that we're going to read to you, the viewer and listener. We're going to do that in just a second, guys. But before we do that, I just want to give a shout to our friends over at Game Time. Game Time, man. Look, they've been with us for a long time, and they're always with you for whatever you want. It's not just sports that they give you tickets towards. They got, you know, theater, they got theater, they have comedy, they've got concerts, they've got all sorts of sports games, and what I love is, as well, they're going to help you save money, man. I mean, isn't that what it's all about? Last minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals for like zones in the stadium and whatnot that you can get easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. Views from all seats if you're a visual person like myself. Lowest prices guaranteed, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. I love it. And they'll have like flash deals and whatnot. And if you can get like your money back if you find a better seat that becomes available in your section, they've got you covered in like every way. I really love Game Time. They're really helpful for stuff. And because you're listening to this podcast, guys, go download the app, Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase just for listening to me be a fool on the internet. You get that, guys. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, spelled just the way the same this podcast is, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed with Game Time. And we are in the waning moments of today's Locked On Padres podcast, guys. Of course, feel free to go check out that Locked On Sports national, 24/7 channel, I think is the way to say it. And then also be sure to go follow me on Twitter and stuff, because I want to get Twitter followers. No, I'm kidding. Go check out there, and then go check out at @LO_Padres as well. Let's do some listener comments and questions. Folks, let's start here. We're going to start with a little bit of the troll comments we got, because again, nobody is safe. You want to leave a comment on my channel? Guess what? You might get a shout out. That's right. It's true. You might get mentioned. And today there's a lot of troll comments from the YouTube, and that's kind of par of the course. You should see the video I did on Ohtani and how rageful I was. The amount of like hate comments, not in like a bad hate, but I mean like slander towards me, I got on that video was crazy. You know what I mean? And I might break down all those at a future episode. Heck, if you guys want me to, I will. But from @FadedBricks, first of all, incredible name, my friend, especially with the brick spelled Z, and it's a Lego of it looks like Boba Fett. Shouts to my guy. He said Dodgers did beat the Padres fair and square. Enjoy that NLDS win, buddy. 2 things, actually 3 things. Once again, love your name and love your picture. It's great. I never said the Dodgers didn't beat the Padres fair and square. I just think for a team and fan base that carries itself like they're the 90s Yankees, or they are the Houston Astros of now, or the Giants that won 3 out of 5, that with the Padres over this latest stretch, this new era of Padres baseball, I think we can assume, I think 2020, 2019 to now is a fair stretch, that when the Padres lost their top 2 starters, you beat them. And then when you didn't have to face them, when you were facing them with their top 2 starters active, in 2022, you lost. That's all I'm saying. And I think it's a big deal. Look, if y'all want to carry yourself like 90s Yankees, not be like, hey, we're great. Of course you're great. You're the best team in baseball in a lot of ways, and you're the best organization in baseball in a lot of ways. But stop carrying yourself like you are the 90s Yankees going back to back when you've choked more often than one in disastrous ways. Teams like the D-backs, teams like the Angels, teams like the Giants, teams like the Cardinals, teams like the Padres. You know what I mean? Teams like the Nationals, right? And then the only time you managed to not choke was the shortened season. I just think that says a lot. So just bring it up. And number 2, stop saying Madres like it's an insult. Grow up. Come on. You know what I mean? Grow up. Moms are awesome. Same thing with, women and everything. Give me a break. It's not an insult. More highlighted comments. Snell doesn't want to play for last place team. He would have stayed with Padres instead. At Joel Lugo 5114, and then at Richard Thompson 7135, Snell doesn't want to play for a last place team. Both of these comments I just want to bring up because I think the presumption for baseball fans is stupid. Everybody assumed this about the Giants a few years ago and they won 107 games. So let's not presume anything. I hate when people presume baseball. Like, it's so, presume sports in general. Like, you can presume NBA to an extent where you can be like, hey, the Celtics will be a top 4 seed probably, barring injuries. Like, yeah, you can predict that stuff. But again, I'm just like, guys, like, and in fairness, this is for Padres fans too. I knew some people being really nasty to Dodgers fans last year. And we don't claim y'all if you're doing that. Being like, oh, effing blank, and shocker, this was towards, a woman online, by the way, that was a Dodgers fan. And it's like, yeah, all right, we beat them in the playoffs, but that doesn't mean you have to trash their whole team and act like it's over and y'all lost. Like, let's not assume things. And again, Giants, it is not a guarantee they're 4th place, or if these comments were at the Padres, is not a guarantee that they're 4th place. It's just not. We don't know how this is going to transpire, and everyone loves to just turn around and be like, yeah, man, I mean, they were so good this year. And it's like, well, you were the one yelling about how they were going to finish 4th. It's like, yeah, this is sports, so let's not be presumptuous. Next comment. This is a general lesson for everybody. Next comment. Oh, look, both of the Dodgers' little brothers. Again, this was on my episode with Ben Kaspic, host of Locked On Giants. Great host. He does a great job over there. Go check it out if you want. I'm sure he's freaking out over the Matt Chapman thing. Again, how are we the little brothers? It doesn't make, at least the Padres makes a little bit of sense. Historically, that's been the case. When have the Giants been the Dodgers' little brother? They've won more than you, and they don't have these really, sus one championship during a shortened season. That's all I'm saying. Dodgers fans, shut up. You're not that guy, bud. You're not that guy. You know what I mean? I've never understood why they keep doing this. Anyway, enough of the dumb questions. Let's get into the fun stuff. This one from Rob Murdy, longtime listener of the pod. Very much appreciate you, buddy. He says, he DM'd me this actually. Not sure if you've already recorded tomorrow's episode. Of course I did it. I usually wait, by the way, for Monday pods, guys, just for an FYI, just in case more comments and DMs come in. So just so you know, the Monday episode where I talk about these things, I usually wait a little bit longer. But I had a couple questions for you. Have you checked out the Ha-Seong Kim YouTube videos about his rise to MLB? I watched it last night and it is really cool. Second question, do you expect the Padres to sign a veteran outfielder like Tommy Pham? First question, I have not. I'm usually, and I'm not throwing any hate, I'm usually not one of those people who cares about like those behind the scene rise to, sort of videos on all these players for 10% political reasons that I won't get into on this pod, but 90% of the reason it's just not what grabs me. It's just not my thing. And that's fine. That's totally fine. But I often find that athletes, and it's totally within their right to be this, and it's totally should be something that they do, that they tend to hold some of their personality and some of their stuff closer to the chest. I totally understand that. So I just feel like I'm going to get a lot of the cliche answers usually. I will say Ha-Seong Kim, a little bit of a difference. Transitioning from the KBO to here, what it's like. I actually think that him is a better example than, say, let's bring up, I don't know why he came to mind. I drafted him in fantasy, that's why. Like Adley Rutschman. And I'm not saying people don't have their unique stories. I'm just saying in my experience, that tends not to be the case. Where, especially baseball, guys are a little bit more secretive. And that's totally, totally fine. I hate when people mock Mike Trout for being boring. I think that's lame. Like, who cares? Watch him play baseball. Enough. It's not his job to have the Joker personality, wherever the heck you guys want, right? But I will say, because of Ha-Seong Kim, he might be the exception. So I'm going to check it out and actually might give my thoughts on a future episode because we love Kim. Kim is the best. And I actually think he fits a couple molds that would be more interesting. I'm like kind of curious, like, does it get into not just his rise as a player and not just the fact that he struggled his rookie year from the batting perspective and how he caught up with MLB velocity, but like literally transitioning from the KBO to here. different country and all. So that's my kind of vibe on it. So I'm going to check it out, Ron Murdy. In terms of the second part of your question about Tommy Pham, look, Dennis Lynn actually wrote about this in his mailbag as well. I think that you could see it. I think that they're still testing out. First of all, I think that there's just a standstill with free agency right now. I was wrong. I thought that the Bellinger contract last week, once he was off the market, that a lot of those other guys would get signed, like your Rosarios, like your Michael A. Taylors, like your Adam Duvall's, like your Tommy Phams. That I thought that they would get signed a lot faster after that. Like he was the domino that needed to fall. But that hasn't happened. So I think that's an in general thing. But I also think that the Padres are genuinely testing out guys like, Jacob Marsee, guys like Graham Pauley, guys like Jackson Merrill. They want to see kind of what they have from those outfield guys and whether or not they're ready before signing a guy. And I also think what I've been saying for a while, I think they want to get one of these guys on 1-year deal. I think if they were to get like a Michael A. Taylor or a Tommy Pham, I think that Pham wants more years. He's older. I believe he's 35, if I'm not mistaken right now. I'm going to check that up really, really quickly. I was just looking at lefties before too. Where are you, Tommy Pham, you little rascal? But however old he is, I think he wants a little bit more than just a 1-year contract, and that's totally within his right. He had a really good season with the Mets and the D-backs. He's 35. And I think that a player like Michael A. Taylor, maybe he wants a little bit more than a 1-year deal. That's my preference. I want to get a guy who you're only going to get for 1 year so you could head into next year's stacked free agency, especially when you have all these interesting young guys, and we don't know how that's going to transpire with some of their outfielders, and you might want to give them some playing time next year. So that's my vibe on it. But I will say, look, it's really rare that teams do a retread. So that would be my one thing. I feel like retreads are really rare. Bringing back Pham, especially since it was a weird kind of vibe back then. Now, again, we'll have to see. Maybe things have calmed down a little bit. Maybe he's got that veteran presence, and there's no Jack Peterson on this team. The team, however, does need lefties, which, by the way, I think is another reason Jackson Merrill might make the opening day roster, by the way, because he's a lefty. I think that's another reason why it's looking likely, especially with Tatis endorsing him recently. He's looked good in spring training, all that. But I will say, the need for a lefty, outside Cronenworth, this is why losing out on guys like Kevin Kiermaier, Travis Janikowski even, and especially Jung-Hoo Lee, who they reportedly were really upset that they missed out on, which, again, shows you the team is ready to spend guys. If it's true that the report that they really were in on Jung-Hoo Lee, like they are ready to spend. They just don't want to just spend to spend's sake, right? And Jung-Hoo Lee's a lefty too. So clearly that's another adage for why they're upset. Jesse Winker's a cheap option with upside, but with Manny taking up the DH spots, I don't love that either. But again, I think one of these moves could happen, but it depends, like who budges first. Can you get one of these guys on a 1-year deal and just feel like, all right, cool, we have a major league proven player. Michael Taylor gives us decent defense, whatever. We'll have to see, I guess. And let me tell you, in terms of lefties, not a lot left. Michael Brantley retired. You got David Peralta, Eddie Rosario, Brad Miller. Once upon a time I was high on. He's a little bit of a, utility player. He could play all over the place. Maybe that has some value. Jared Walsh, hilariously enough, is a free agent, but he's first base. So that's not really going to work. Again, I think it's more likely than not that they bring in a major league experience outfielder, but I could be wrong. The market's weird right now. Next question. This one isn't as much of a question, but it is a giant comment from my guy, assistant to the GM. Let me find your DM real quick on Twitter. At DDKeeling3, assistant to the junior GM, another longtime listener of the pod. Thank you, sir, for sending in your thoughts. He just wrote an essay, and I just want to read it. All right, so, and he said he just needs to get his thoughts down. For starting pitching, Lugo and Waka had innings question marks coming into last year, similar or worse than the ones for Brito and Vasquez this year. Additionally, Brito and Vasquez project to have basically the same ERA and WHIP as Lugo and Waka. Snell had a ton of question marks going into last year too, and his projections this year are pretty similar to King. In parentheses, I would bake in more regression from Snell too since he's still unsigned. Bullpen, can't replace Hader, but the rest of the bullpen is a lot better, deeper. Offense, Merrill is better than Grish. Camp is better than Nola. And DH literally can't be worse than last year. Great point, by the way, the DH. Remember when we were watching Matt Carpenter and Nelson Cruz, like, earnestly taking hacks? That was rough, man. I think the extra WAR we get from healthy Tatis, Cronenworth, Manny, Xander, and Camp this year will cancel out what we got from Soto last year. Basically, we lose Soto, but should expect everyone else to get better, which could cover the gap. Defense, better alignment this year with Kim at shortstop, and literally anyone we put in left field will be better than Soto. Grisham regressed last year. Azokar probably cancels out. First of all, I want to really attest to, my friend, what you mentioned about the rest of the team picking up the slack. This is why I don't like when people bring up the Padres lost 15 WAR. You're assuming too much about that Soto is a guaranteed 6. I mean, he's as close as a guarantee as you get, but you get my point. That Snell is going to be worth 4 again. That Hader's worth 2.5 again. And you're forgetting that Manny Machado was hurt last year and banged up. You're forgetting that Xander Bogaerts, if he just wasn't so bad, having a slash line below 200, a BABIP of 200, with runners in scoring position, Xander Bogaerts' year is great. He was better than Trey Turner. I don't know why it drives me insane that everyone gives Trey Turner so much applause for his second half and ignore that Xander was better in the second half. See, I'm already getting my thumbs up thing. Xander was just as, electric in the second half. He just didn't have the driving the runs in. Trey Turner drove in runs, don't get me wrong, but the thing with not driving in runs, that's a little bit more luck and fluky. You know what I mean? Especially for a guy who had like a 126 WRC plus in Boston with runners in scoring position and had a 300 batting average with runners in scoring position. So I don't understand that. If you get anything from Cronenworth, if you get anything back from Manny, especially with the offense coming back, he's going to start with this DH to begin the season. Again, that's my thing, is I don't like how everyone's just penciling in the Padres only lost stuff. It's like part of the reason the Padres were bad last year is because of a lot of players underperformed, not because of just depth. That was a big part, but it wasn't just depth. And I think that you really attuned to that. And again, we had Austin Nola catching for so long, who was, he had a big eye issue. And I feel bad that I made fun of him, but we didn't know at the time, that he had that issue. I just thought that he stunk. Now you have Campuzano there and Higashioka as a very capable backup, by the way. I'm just saying, there were some really bad holes, with DH. Manny alone Machado could bat DH for a week and might give us more at DH for the whole year than what Matt Carpenter and Nelson Cruz were giving the Padres last year. So that's my thing. Let's consider all of the bounce backs and the fact that if they just don't go 9-23 in 1-run games and 2-12 in extra innings games, this is like an 88 win team. Seriously. And don't get me wrong, there are still questions. I'm really curious to see how Yu Darvish looks, how Michael King looks, the back end of the rotation. I get it, but let's not act like Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha are irreplaceable seasons that we just lost. Irreplaceable. Now, Wacha is better than Lugo, but I'm just saying, it's not impossible that they bring in some guys and that they can deliver and just be innings eaters and be solid. And not to mention, they have a good defense behind them to help cover up if they make any mistakes. So, again, I'm really high on the Padres because of a lot of those reasons. And yes, I also agree with the defensive alignment. Left field is going to be better, probably. You can't be much worse than Soto. Let's say it's Merrill as a starting left fielder. If it's Merrill as a starting left fielder, that makes me want to get a little bit more of a major league proven talent in center. Then that's really great. Profar is quite bad out there, though, at least based on last year. So I would watch out for that in terms of the defense definitely being better without Soto. But Xander Bogaerts, not a bad shortstop. Kim's better, though. What if Xander Bogaerts is awesome defensively at second base? I'm just saying. Assistant to the junior GM. I don't know your real name exactly. Keeling? D.D. Keeling? I don't know your real name, but I think you broke it down really well, and maybe you should host the podcast. No, I'm kidding. But, in all seriousness, guys, believe in this team. There's a lot of reasons to expect a bounce back. And I know everyone's talking about the losing stuff, but this is baseball. How many times have y'all seen teams that lose some of their best players be even better than next year? I'm just saying. Not to throw in Moneyball, but it happens a lot when you're least expecting it. Teams will fall out of the playoffs this next year. And as long as the Padres are not, for the second year in a row, which is pretty rare, unconscionably bad in clutch situations, they're going to be a good team. At least in just my opinion. Whew. That was a fun rant. And that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, guys. Got a little bit more long-winded than I expected, as usual. What do you want from me? I don't know how to stop talking. Remember to check out the podcast over at LO_Padres on Twitter or Locked On Padres on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at Javapeno, JAVIIPENO, the best handle in the game, dare I say. Go check out as well. I was on a podcast recently. I'm blanking on the podcast name real quick. The Big Fly Pod from my guy Tyler Ewan interviewed me, you go check that out. Really fun being on that show. We just kind of talked about all the narratives. If you just want more of me talking for whatever reason, my condolences to you. But in all seriousness, go check that out. And then also in terms of the future of the show, going to be talking a little bit more about Xander Bogaerts as a second baseman. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about potential lineups that we may see. I've been teasing this for a while, but going to look at that, especially because AJ Casfell wrote a really interesting article over at MLB.com about what his Padres lineup will look like. Ranking top 10 players in the Padres, all sorts of stuff, and maybe doing an interview soon with a major league player. Oh, that's right. A pro ball player might come on my show. Wow. Yeah. That's just a little bit of a tease, though, guys. Until next time, stay safe, and of course, stay faithful. My Fire Faithful homies. Take care.